Here.
We go.
Go.
Again.
Yes, sir.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Kickback, live from the MMA Underground. We are your hosts from the Neon Belly Podcast, Nate,
John,
Brandon.
and tonight, everybody, we are talking all things UFC 292 and giving our thoughts, boys, and final predictions on all the card's biggest fights. So glad everybody made weight this week.
Yeah.
It's always a last-minute nightmare to prep for. And obviously, per usual, we want all you guys to chime in down in the chat. Let us know your picks as we move along. And with that, boys, how we doing on the eve of UFC 292?
Doing good. Starting to really enjoy these. Like right before fight night.
Yeah.
Like I like it a lot.
What kind of vibe is this card giving you right now?
This card?
Yeah.
What's it giving?
Yeah. Like, I don't know. We'll kind of get into that. Like, for me, I'm really amped for it. Like, the matchup itself, as far as like O'Malley and Sterling, I like it a lot. I mean, it's not the biggest card ever, but I think it's a good card. I'm excited for it.
Well, if you don't think this is a big one, wait till 293.
Yeah.
That card is strong.
I mean, I'll be very hyped.
Yeah, John's ready.
But you guys won't.
Well, we're going to get right into it. And before we do, though, John, every time we do one of these, we ask the people to do something. Rate, sub, follow, let the people know.
Yeah, like Nike said, we host a weekly mixed martial arts podcast called the Neon Belly Podcast. We release new episodes every Monday. We give our picks and predictions for upcoming fights, just like we will tonight, and we recap every event. We also hit all the biggest news and headlines around the sport of MMA while sprinkling in some occasional MMA-themed games and challenges.
Sure.
You can check out the pod on all streaming platforms, including Apple and Spotify. We do ask that you subscribe to the pod on whatever streaming platform you prefer. Give us 5-star ratings. Helps us out a lot. Give us a follow on all socials at Neon Belly Podcast. We also ask that you follow the MMA Underground at the UG on all socials. Make sure you click that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, so you know not only the next time we do the kickback, but all the other content that they post, interviews and such. So.
Absolutely. Also, it was going to be down in the description. I don't know that it is right now, but hopefully we can put that in afterwards. But go, so they're doing the voting for the World MMA Awards, and obviously two guys that are pillars and integral parts of this channel and network and all the socials is obviously Cody Merrow and John Morgan. Cody is the producer of the Anakin Florian podcast, which is up for Best MMA Programming, and John Morgan is up for Journalist of the Year. So please, if you support this channel and the content on this channel and the social medias and all the things that's going on the UG, mixedmartialarts.com, please go and give these guys a vote. And plus, it's fun. I liked it. It's quick. It's easy to sign up. There's like knockout of the year, sub of the year. There's just every category you can ask for. But I know that Cody and John would really appreciate if you guys did that. And no, they did not ask me to do that for the record. So
yeah. No, well, as many people is going to come in here and ask for him. If you really love John Morgan, go vote for him. Let that guy get that shine.
Absolutely. And then as I mentioned, Anakin Florian Pod for MMA Programming of the Year. Cody does a ton of work to produce that podcast. I think they do 2 shows a week now. So a lot of work goes into that. Plus he's helping getting ready with this and everything else on this channel. So gotta love it. Make sure you support the MMA Awards there. And let us get into it, boys. Let's set the stage for UFC 292, which goes down tomorrow night live from TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts. And let's
Massachusetts.
God, I love Cheeto Vera, man. And a little fun fact about Boston, boys, I got to have one, is the Boston University Bridge is the location of a globally unique phenomenon, John. Are you ready for this?
Let's go.
The bridge is the only place anywhere in the world where a boat can sail under a train going under a vehicle while driving under an airplane.
Nice.
It is an architectural phenomenon.
Yeah.
Look it up. Look at the picture. It's interesting. Seems like your type of reading, Brandon.
Yeah.
Did that move you a little bit?
Well, after this, I'm going to go look it up.
Yeah.
So.
It's cool, man.
Sounds like the final scene to Final Destination too, though. Like there's so much that could go wrong there.
There's a lot that could go wrong there. Before we get to the main card and all of our featured bouts, something that we like to do, because as always, man, especially when you get these big pay-per-views, there's a ton of fights happening down on the prelims that are fun. We call them our 3 to see. John, what is your 3 to see on the prelims for UFC 292?
All right, we're going to start things off with the 2 Ultimate Fighter finale fights, both featuring former UFC fighters. At 155, Kurt Hollaball is 3-0 since being released by the UFC, all 3 being knockouts. He faces Austin Hubbard, who is also 3-0 outside the UFC. Then at bantamweight, you have Cody Gibson, who's 8-2 since leaving the UFC in 2015. He faces Brad Katana, who's won 5 in a row since leaving the UFC. This is 2 huge chances for both of these guys to get back to the big show. And lastly, I want to highlight Natalia Silva, who's on the early prelims, but she could very easily find herself into a big fight with the win. Her last loss was Marina Rodriguez in 2017, but since then she's won 9 in a row with 8 finishes.
I love it. And I want to ask you guys, and anybody in the chat, feel free to chime in. I would love to know everybody's thoughts on this. But what was your interest on The Ultimate Fighter this year? And what is your interest even more so in these finale fights tomorrow night? I'd also like to know how many episodes did everybody watch this season, and did you enjoy it? Because I'll admit, man, I'm several episodes behind this season. A lot of that due to the fact that I get home late from jiu-jitsu on these nights, and really all that I'm concentrated on is H2O and oxygen. So I'm just not privy to all the storylines going into these. Dude, it's tough, man. You get home from a hard night of jiu-jitsu and you're sitting in bed till 11, 12 o'clock just still trying to catch your breath sometimes. That's me. Gotta love when you tie your belt a little too tight too on the gi. That doesn't help either. But I'll say I did struggle a bit, though, to get into this season. That's really, I think, what a lot of it came down to. And I wondered if some of it kind of had to do with the whole question marks around the Chandler-McGregor fight and if it would even happen, right? Because that's kind of what we were sold on going into it. And the fact that we still don't have a date when we were told when the season started that it was going to be announced in season, right? I thought that was a little interesting that we never got it. There are rumors that the date is going to be announced tomorrow night on the UFC 292 broadcast. I don't even know if I'd say rumor as much as speculation. I did see Dana said Conor is not going to be there tomorrow night. I think Chandler will be, though. But we'll see. But I also kind of got the vibe from the episodes that I watched, speaking of Conor, he just wasn't into that. He just wasn't that into this season either. So I don't know, man. I'd like to know what you guys thought, though, kind of with the season and where your temperature is on this season finale fights.
Yeah, so initially, man, I was pumped. I was really excited for the whole season. Chandler McGregor, 2 really big stars. I was really excited for the season. I thought the concept of vets was really cool. I watched the first 4 episodes, and then somewhere between 3 and 4 was when we started to have the uncertainty surrounding the fight between McGregor and Chandler. And literally, we even started talking about that, I think, on our pod. And it just kind of felt I started to lose steam in terms of my interest because, all right, and McGregor, like you said, he didn't really seem to care too much about the team aspect of it. And granted, I've only watched 4 episodes, maybe that turns around, but it just seemed to me like he wasn't invested. The fight isn't up anymore, so it's I'm just watching Chandler be really invested in these guys, and these guys who are vying for a spot, which is awesome. It shouldn't all be about the coaches, I guess, but yeah, that's just kind of how it felt.
Well, but to an extent, that is what it is. I mean, it's a reality TV show. Yes, the fighting is, kind of the center of it and what it's around, but it is a reality TV show. You do want that story, those storylines and the fun moments and different things like that.
And the coaches challenge, man. I saw that was, it was tricky. I'm are you serious? This is just ridiculous.
Dana was super mad at that.
Yeah, he was mad just more how long they were in there.
In the chat, we got Marcus checking in, Marcus Mustard saying Boston baby, and Dorman saying 0 interest in this season, never been a Conor fan. I knew the format wouldn't be fair from the first episode. Exciting fights, though.
Yeah.
And I mean, I agree to some of that. I think with social media kind of telling you what happens in episodes if you don't get to watch them, especially when you hear about how Conor has been and you see how Chandler's really invested in that's cool to see. But what you were really signing up for watching this is this back and forth between Conor and Chandler, and you did see a glimpse of what you were hoping for when Conor gets a win. But then when that doesn't happen anymore, it's just more of Conor kind of seeming sad almost.
Sure. Yeah, I was just interested on everybody's temperature on this Ultimate Fighter finale because it does seem like it's just kind of thrown in there a little bit.
These are usually their own events.
Kind of sometimes,
At least back in the day when it was in its hot.
Yeah, like a fight night style. Yeah, so, I was just curious. But I agree with Brandon. I did love the format going into it. I still do. I know there was a lot of guys that kind of did get, I know Jason Knight, his kind of stock went up a little bit. And I still hope a guy like him finds his way back in, to the UFC. I love Jason Knight.
Big Ben in the chat saying Conor is the best. Can't wait to see him in Bare Knuckle FC.
That might be the move next.
Right.
That literally might be him and KSI. Sign me up.
Right.
Well, let us start getting into this card, boys. And as we do, we're going to start out with probably the most unfortunate news heading into this. We got hit with this last Saturday night, and that is Cody Garbrandt, who was due to face Mario Bautista on this card, had to withdraw due to injury. So stepping up and filling in his place is the former CFFC bantamweight champion, Damon Blackshear. And ironically, Damon was fighting on the card last Saturday when it was announced that Cody was out. Damon obviously won his fight last Saturday as well, becoming just the third man in UFC history to win by Twister. And here he is 7 days later, turning around to face a surging contender, in Bautista. This turnaround ties a UFC record for fastest fight turnaround. This guy is only going into his fourth UFC fight, and he's already putting his name in history, literally. And we actually kind of talked Monday on our pod a little bit more extensively about Damon, and he's definitely one that we think has a bright future.
And you actually literally can't turn around any faster because fights are on the weekend. Yeah. So unless you did like a midweek fight or something, there's no way you can
Hamzat benefited a little bit, but because he had the midweek one, but right. But it was still 10 days.
Yeah, and and to step in for a situation like this, you have to bet on yourself, right? If you get this opportunity to be on a main card on a Sean O'Malley pay-per-view, an Aljamain pay-per-view, then you have to take it. But there's definitely a side that's just like, man, Mario Bautista is a dog.
Do you think these situations are kind of like almost win-wins, though? When you
for a guy like Blackshear, I think it gives you a free shot, right?
But just in general, right? Like, to be able to slide in like that, like, not necessarily the week's notice part, but just, because he's going to get paid. Yeah. He gets an extra fight on his contract, assuming that it wasn't already established. And, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of benefits to being able to step in like that.
I think there's a lot, for Blackshear, I think there's a lot of benefits. Even for Bautista, it's a last-minute fight still for him, too, right? And,
different fighter.
Very different. Yeah, stylistically, this is a very different matchup. We don't make picks on last-minute fights, but I will say I think this fight has potential to steal fight of the night going into this. I think this was going to be a very tough matchup for Cody Garbrandt. I have to be honest. And for what it's worth, I was going to take Mario Bautista in this fight. I just think it was going to be I love Cody Garbrandt, man, but I think this was going to be a tough in terms of just stylistically the matchup. But this new matchup is very interesting, even given the short notice nature of it. One of the things that makes Bautista so good is his forward pressure, his takedowns. He's strong. He's a physical guy, right? And his finishing is next level on the ground. And with 3 straight submission victories, you can see why, right? But then when you look at Blackshear's game, those are all things that he kind of excels at too, right? He's always pressuring forward, throwing heavy strikes, looking to utilize his wrestling and get the fight down. I'm still ever so slightly going to lean Bautista here, though, just because of the quick turnaround and double weight cuts for Blackshear. Important to remember that. He did make the 135 limit again here, and I think we just saw the effect, right, that had on a guy like Jack Della Maddalena just a couple weeks ago. But because of that, I do think Blackshear is going to come out and just go for it early.
Yeah, you have to.
Oh, yeah, and both of these guys already dynamite every time they fight. That's why I think I could see this stealing fight of the night a little bit. And I will say, though, I wouldn't be shocked if come Monday's pod episode, we aren't talking about a Damon Blackshear win. Even with that, he's a tough, big guy, man. A win that also, by the way, would put his name back in the UFC record books again for the fastest UFC back-to-back wins in the modern era, obviously, given, back in, the tournament days, they were fighting multiple times a night. But Lupi Godinez was the other fighter to turn around on 7 days, and she lost that fight. I believe Hamzat currently holds the record. That's what I was saying. His back-to-back wins were 10 days because it was like a midweek card. It was back during Fight Island.
Right.
I think they did like a Wednesday night card, and then he fought like that next Saturday. So just kind of something else to watch for on this card. I think it's an interesting storyline. If he were to pull it off, it's an interesting matchup. I think it's a doable thing for him. It's just, man, those weight cuts. It just got to be so tough. And he's a bigger 35er, I feel like, too.
Right. In the chat, we got Marcus Mustard saying, Damon, the monster with the momentum against Batista and MMA Labs momentum. He agrees that they're both dogs. Dorman saying, great fights. Batista gets the win, but rooting for Blackshear. And then West Coast, I don't know if this is just a nickname or a misspelling, said Black Shirt is going to win via sub or / TKO with the laugh emoji and the praying hands.
Dude,
but
I feel like there's a lot of people leaning Blackshear. Like, I feel like the hype is real. And there is something to turning around so fast. And I'll be honest, man, if this was at like a 40, maybe even a 45 catch weight, but even just a 40, I might have leaned Blackshear a little bit. It's just so tough because, like, I know, like, and I keep drawing back to the Jack Della, and I know he said that the weight cut didn't have any effect, but I mean, we all know it kind of. I mean, that just wasn't a JDM performance like we've seen from him, right? So you have to assume it. I know what he was doing there, but I don't know, man. It's a tough ask, but these guys are, I mean, it's a great matchup.
For me, I just think that Batista has, I mean, even his performances, his past 3 against some really good competition, just speak out a little bit more to me because from what I see, it's a lot of very heavy, hard, like everything he throws is to hurt you. He's not touching you to throw a follow-up.
Sure.
Everything is the big one. And then once you're so rocked from him hitting you so much, he gets great level changes and starts working his top game. So it'll be interesting to see if Blackshear can get him on his back because that's not something we've seen in the UFC from Batista.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just the biggest thing too, right? With Batista, he's just faced higher competition as well. But man, Blackshear being, and I'm not just saying, the reason I threw it out there that he was a former CFFC champion is if you look at the champions that, I mean, Aljo, Merab, Anthony Smith, Sean Brady, I mean, Aaron Blanchfield. I mean, they've had Caitlin Chukagian. I mean, CFFC produces talent at the highest level. And when those people become champions, they usually find themselves in the UFC and then usually fighting at the top. So that's what I'm saying. Like, look out for Blackshear no matter what happens Saturday night.
And this could be a sense where we see a really good fight where you say kind of like with Lopez against Evola, where it's like, if this guy gets a full camp, this fight could have went a lot different.
Dude, even if they just moved it to like the 292 card or something, you know, like, just give it a little bit more time. It'd be interesting. But again, I could still see it going either way. Wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about a Blackshear win on Monday. So let us move now into our first featured bout in the middleweight division and the feel-good story, boys, of not just this card, but possibly the whole year in sports. I mean, this is just going to be an amazing thing, and that is Chris Weidman versus Brad Tavares. And I think I get chills a little bit thinking about Tom Petty's Won't Back Down hitting the speakers of the TD Garden tomorrow night, boys. I am pumped for Chris Weidman because he's making that walk for the first time in 847 days, about over 2 years. That night back in April of 2021, obviously Chris suffering that horrible leg break, one of the worst, top 3 or 4 worst in the UFC. One of them he was on the giving end of, with Anderson Silva. That was against Uriah Hall. But every day since then, he's worked himself back to this moment, including even having to have a second surgery, after they found out the fracture wasn't healing properly. He had to go back in, another surgery, but fought his way back. He's going to return to the UFC cage this Saturday, like he said he would. Welcoming back to the show here is another veteran and fan favorite, Brad Tavares. Tavares coming in on a rough run of form, it has to be said, with back-to-back setbacks, easier for me to say, against Dricus du Plessis, and most recently a first-round TKO loss to Bruno Silva back in April. Tavares has won just 2 of his last 6, dating back to 2018, so he definitely needs a win here too as well. And man, what a rough spot too for him to need a win, because I think the crowd is going to be obviously heavily on Weidman's side, and many people wanting that like kind of Hollywood-esque finish here for Weidman. It's a tough spot for Brad Tavares to be in tomorrow.
For sure.
Yep. We're making picks on this one, right?
We are making a pick. I'm curious. What are you thinking, Brandon?
What? You want my pick?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love Chris Weidman. Okay, like I want him to win this fight so bad, but he's not my pick. My pick is Brad Tavares. I think, and a lot of that is, man, the 2-year layoff with the leg break. He wasn't in the greatest run of form even prior to the leg break. He's 39, I believe. He's not the Chris Weidman that was, running through the middleweight division, took out Anderson Silva, took out Lyoto and Vitor. I mean, he was fantastic. I mean, since the Rockland loss, he's just been kind of rough, So, and his chin is fading. I want him to win. I would love for him to get in there, wrestle Tavares, take him down, submit him, TKO him, but I'm going to go with Tavares.
I like it. What are you thinking?
Here's the thing too, though. Brad Tavares hasn't been a world beater either and he's never really been that guy. He's kind of worked his way up and never been able to get past that middle tier. So it's hard to say who's like what level each guy's on right now, because his last win was 2021, and that's when Chris Weidman lost his last fight, and obviously he's been out since then.
Sure, fair. That's a fair point.
So there's a little bit of parity there. I did watch the embeddeds, and Chris Weidman looks kind of good, man.
Yeah.
He's in good shape. Even seeing him do like rolls and pad work, he looks like he's really sharp. And I almost want to throw up saying his name right now to win this, because as an Anderson fan, I just hate this.
John's never let it go. I've moved as an Anderson fan. I've moved
never.
On.
No, dude, I just can't do it
twice.
But I do love him. I think he's hilarious. It's kind of like one of those things I just can't admit too much. But
yeah,
I'm gonna go Chris Weidman on this one. I think he will use the wrestling, and I think that I don't know that Brad Tavares has the game to stop him from getting to that.
So, as an Anderson fan, going back to that first fight, the first fight with Weidman when he knocked Anderson out, I was in Vegas that week. I was there for International Fight Week, could not afford a ticket into the event. I actually stood in line, I believe it was at the MGM Grand, if I remember. I stood in line behind Milky Kawa, who the only reason I knew who that was is because I was a massive John Jones fan, and I knew he was John Jones' manager at the time. And I'm standing there with Ash, and I'm like kind of trying to like tell her who it is, and she just wasn't buying it. Finally, I was like, I'm just gonna shoot my shot, and I was just like, hey man, I can't afford a ticket. Is there any way? Could not care less. Which like,
you've literally never told that story.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
Fair enough to him. I get it, and he was on the phone too. But it was like we were kind of getting to the end of the line. Like I think he was like picking tickets up, is what it seemed like, and we were kind of going up to like the will call booth area, and he was on the phone, and I was just like, I got to do it right. So I just like tap him on the shoulder, and he just gives me, and he was just like, no, just like I was like, fair enough. I mean, but you got to try, right? I knew I was gonna be able to afford these tickets, man. Right. But yeah, so like getting back to the fight though, like Brandon, but I'm over the Chris. I love Chris Weidman. I've moved on. John's harboring a little bit there.
I'll just never let it go publicly.
With Brandon too, and it's not just the form before for Chris Weidman. It was the finishes, right? And all of the losses being by TKO. I think there was 6 of them there, or something crazy that he lost by TKO or finish. So yeah, even before the Hall fight, I think we were seeing a bit of a durability issue for Weidman. And he's going against a guy who is pretty durable in Brad Tavares. And I know he's coming off the quick finish to Bruno Silva, but if you go back one fight prior, Tavares had an absolute war with Dricus du Plessis, who finishes everybody. Right. Literally, of his 20 wins, DDP has one decision victory, and its name is Brad Tavares. This is the only guy to go to a decision with Dricus. But I don't think that means necessarily either for Tavares coming off a loss that we're seeing a fading Tavares. I just think Bruno Silva hits like a truck, man. Right. Remember, Silva almost got Alex Pereira out of there, right? Which, if you imagine, if he would have finished Alex Pereira,
like in the other timeline,
dude, in another timeline, if you imagine Bruno Silva finishing Alex Pereira, wild. When you think about where Alex Pereira is right now, crazy, man. But nonetheless, I just feel if this comes down to attrition, right? Which I could see. I could see this going a little longer. I just think Tavares has the better chance to win that battle. I know there's an argument for Weidman having the time off. Maybe the chin's recovered a little bit. But you do hear a lot of fighters say when the chin goes, it goes. Like that's a cliche thing, but you do hear that a lot. And Tavares isn't the guy you want testing that either, I don't think. Weidman could look to take it down, lean on his grappling a little bit.
We've seen it the past 2 weeks.
But Tavares also has good takedown defense as well, and also some pretty underrated grappling, I think. I want the feel-good story for Weidman. I'm like Brandon, I really do, but I have to lean Tavares here. And I know Chris Weidman isn't showing up for moral victories on Saturday, but I will say the fact that he's even making that walk again, I can't understate how impressive that is. And he's basically already got a big W in life already, as Dustin Poirier put it a couple weeks ago, right? He's already winning in life just for getting here, man.
Right.
So
in the chat, Marcus Mustard saying crazy reminds me of Alex Smith, the quarterback from the Redskins, back with a similar break.
Yeah.
But he said doctors cleared them, so I'll be watching, squinting a little. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, did you see why Weidman said, you just can't check my first leg kick, and he said he'd give him one back. He told Brad Tavares he'd give him one back.
Well, and before that, he said the first thing he wants to do is just blast a leg kick as hard as he can. So.
Yeah, I don't know, man. So obviously you guys know, people watching, I had in jiu-jitsu, I did a fractured tib, dislocated fib, just about a year and a half ago. It might have been vice versa, but that happened. Yeah. Horrible, like, snapped in half my ankle. And like even just Thursday, right, I was going with Chase and had one hook in, and he just moved a little, and it hurt, man. Like it still hurts, you know.
Right.
And I'm a year and a half out now. I am not Chris Weidman. I am not a world class athlete. Not pretending like I am.
Right.
And I'm sure he's done extensive physical therapy, but I'm not a lazy guy either that just sits around on, you know, like I stay pretty active and stuff. So, there is something to that, man. Like I can't sit here and say like if somebody kicked me in mine, I would be done for it. Again, I know Chris Weidman's done more than I have. I'm not saying that, but there is something to those lingering injuries, and one's that bad, man. It's so tough. It's so tough. That's why I give him so much credit for coming back. It's a tough thing. So yeah, I want it for him, but yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, it's also an interesting thing because, you know, the middleweight division is very interesting right now. So if one of these guys can kind of turn it back on, you know, they have a good chance, especially because they've both been in there with some of the best in the division already.
Absolutely. And let us move to our next matchup in a couple of bantamweights with number 6, Marlon Chito Vera versus number 10, Pedro Munoz. Let us lead with the fact first that Henry Cejudo was originally scheduled to be Chito's opponent, withdrew for the shoulder injury back in June. What a bummer. I was really excited for that fight. And Munoz stepped into this spot as soon as it was announced that Henry was out. Munoz stepped in pretty quickly. So he's had pretty decent time. Vera comes into this fight off his disappointing split decision loss to Corey Sandhagen back in March. And before that fight, Chito was on a nice 4-fight win streak, though, with wins over Dom Cruz, Rob Font, Frankie Edgar, and our boy, Wavy Davy Grant. You know, we're the Wavy Davy fan train.
For sure.
Yeah, the line starts behind us when it comes to Davy Grant. Munoz comes into this fight off a very impressive win over Chris Gutierrez back in April, and that was a massive win for Pedro, right? He came into that fight with just one win in his last 6, and that is including the 1-no contest with Sean O'Malley. And it really felt like that was setting Gutierrez up to take Pedro's spot in the top 10, right? And Munoz was unwilling to relinquish at this time. He said, call back, try again, son. But here he is just 4 months later in another super tough fight against one of the best bantamweights in the world in Chito Vera. And that's kind of the story for me with these two guys. And they both are just constantly fighting the toughest fights available, and more often than not, they find themselves with fight of the night or performance bonuses. Like if you go through, that's usually what they're going home with, and that's why I'm so excited for this fight.
Yeah, so the stylistically, I think it's going to be a fun one. Like I'm leaning Chito here. I feel like Chito does this thing. Like it's kind of been shown through all his fights except for Sandhagen. Sandhagen really controlled him with the grappling, but every fight prior to that, Chito will kind of get outstruck, and then he just lands this bomb and takes somebody out. Like he always will get outstruck in his fights, and then he'll end up finishing the guy that's in front of him. Pedro, I feel like he's the guy who's going to probably stand there and try to leg kick Chito the entire time, like he was doing with O'Malley. He actually won that first round with O'Malley via leg kicks, but I feel like Chito, you can't do that with him. He's gonna be throwing bombs the entire time, and Pedro is probably gonna. I don't know when's the last time Pedro was finished?
Neither of them have ever been.
Never. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if Pedro's gonna be able to finish him, but I don't know if
Munoz.
Yeah, I'm all over the place, guys.
You got it.
Munoz is.
Brandon's our only dad, everybody.
Yeah, guys.
Brandon's the only dad.
Point being,
it's past 9 o'clock. Brandon's our only dad.
Yeah.
Point being here, the way I see this fight going is Pedro's gonna try to leg kick. And it's not going to work with Chito. Chito's going to blast him in the face. He's going to end up winning the war of attrition if it gets to that point. But I almost could see it via finish just because Pedro's been doing this for a long time. But I could also see Pedro sneaking a really nice submission win with this as well.
You are just so confused right now. You don't know what you want to do.
Well, I'm kind of going back and forth because I wrote this down. I actually have it written down on my phone.
I can just see the gears turning. I just see you're thinking. I feel like I see a bead of sweat forming right above.
Well, while you're
eyebrow.
thinking, we got some chat action.
All right.
King Nug's in here now.
Oh boy.
And Nung, my bad. He said he started out with "Daddy's in the chat, skid it, bow to me, all of you." Then he said Pedro Munoz will sadly get KO'd by a head kick on a lateral exit from southpaw. Specific opinion, and $5 a month for his picks.
Okay.
Okay.
hold on to that pick.
Now I know who it is.
Yeah, so I want you to think about that pick because there is one thing that I do want to discuss with this matchup. So give you a little time to process who you want, and that is, one storyline kind of heading into this fight is that Sean O'Malley saying that he hopes Cheeto wins, so he can be his first title defense. Obviously, O'Malley wants that rematch. Corey Sandhagen had something to say about that. Obviously, Merab would probably also have something to say. O'Malley said he would want to fight Cheeto in December if he wins. I don't think Corey will be ready to go because I think he's out for like 4 or 6 months with the tricep. But if we'll get to in a minute, if O'Malley wins and Merab is ready to go by December, which I think he would be because I think he was only out for like 6 weeks and that was just back in like August. So I think he could make December. Surely Merab has to be the guy to go over Cheeto, right? Even if Cheeto were to win, or I don't know, do you guys think if Cheeto wins, he could be deserving? Because O'Malley's argument was that Cheeto would be the bigger fight over Merab in terms of like selling tickets and things like that.
I mean, he's not lying. I mean, because if Sean,
I think Merab's got a buzz, man.
But no, it's not because of Cheeto. It's because of O'Malley. If O'Malley wins the belt and becomes a champion, his stock goes up.
Sure.
And what's the most entertaining name attached to him? The loss that he won't acknowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, and the only person.
What about the opponent he won't acknowledge in Merab?
Right.
But there's tons of those across different divisions.
Sure.
Right. And I think when you're talking about an optic of the entertainment business, Merab attempting 30 takedowns in a fight doesn't quite translate as much as what him and Cheeto could have the potential to be. But one of them could start doing grap. I mean, we've seen, like I said, we've seen it the past couple of weeks where guys kind of change their game. But I think on paper, Merab does have a lot of stock, but he's also been weirdly tied to whatever Aljo does, which we'll get into. But I think that kind of makes it hard for people to fully buy into him because he's never going to face the guy who's the GOAT of potentially of the division.
I think the bigger fight would be Cheeto. Like I completely agree with John on this. Honestly, I don't say that a lot.
And I think it is an interesting discussion and topic because as we were literally before we hit record, we were just started the stream up. We were talking there is a situation. Aljo did announce this week with Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour that if he wins, he is 100% moving up to featherweight. With a loss, he's 99% sure he's moving up to featherweight.
Right.
So after Saturday, I mean, there's a chance we don't have a bantamweight. Like, there's a chance after Saturday. I guess what I'm trying to say is, regardless, we're going to need 2 guys, right? Whether Aljo wins and then eventually vacates, and then we need a new bantamweight matchup, or if O'Malley were to win, and obviously Aljo's going up, so no rematch. It's just going to be whoever's next. So I do think who's next is important, and I do think this is a really big fight for that. I feel like it's a little bit unfair for Pedro, though, because if you're saying this is a number 1 contender match for Cheeto, then regardless of how Pedro's run has been, then I mean, I feel like if he beats Cheeto, I mean,
well, I think what we've also had to accept is that sometimes it's not about who deserves it and what makes the most sense as far as fighter to fighter. It is entertainment. It is,
I know
the
it comes
sell.
down to that for sure.
Because Marcus Mustard just said he did confirm 6 to 8 months is what Corey Sandhagen's going to be out for.
It's going to be a while.
And what O'Malley does have going for him, even in the losses, we've seen the UFC will give the guy who recently fought for the title a chance in a vacant sometimes if they don't feel like there's another person there. Which
you got Cejudo though; he'll be back soon too. I mean,
but he's coming off a loss too, so depending on who's available. Because if Cheeto wins and O'Malley loses, you could still do Cheeto and Merab for the belt at that point because he's the only one coming off of a win outside of Sandhagen who will be out.
It's just going to be very interesting after tomorrow night. Like the bantamweight division is going to be shaken up because we pretty much know now, no matter what happens in the main event, there's going to be a new champion next time the bantamweight title's competed for. I mean, you know what I mean?
Well, and a big shakeup in the featherweight too because you're having an all-time great going up, man.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. What's your pick?
Cheeto.
I like it. John, who you taking?
I'm going Cheeto as well.
Really? Okay. I like it.
And it's because of Sean O'Malley saying, I want you as my... He has to go. He can't wait. This is his biggest chance to get to the title immediately.
John's an Izzy fan, so he's all about manifesting. And
no, I'm just saying, like, when people have a chance like this guy... I mean, Pedro didn't get the same call out from Sean O'Malley. It was just Cheeto. So if he's giving you this shot to line it up, then you have to go for it.
Is that how you see it?
Yeah, 100%.
It's because he's an Izzy fan. He's all about manifesting it. He sees his opponent. John knows what's next. That's the thing about it. What's tough for me, I think, is I always get both of these guys wrong because they both have versions of themselves that don't show up. Or they kind of underperform, and I think both of them would kind of agree with that to some extent. But dude, I think this time I'm going Pedro Munoz. I really do. I know he was spiraling a bit before his last fight, but I was extremely impressed with his performance in that Gutierrez fight. He came out against Gutierrez, got on the gas, and just never let up. He sprinted for 3 straight rounds, and I know it's like beating a dead horse, but historically, yes, we all know Cheeto kind of takes a few rounds to get going, right? Or in the case of the Sandhagen fight, he just never got going, right? And you just can't do that here against a guy like Pedro. And I will say, Jason Perillo telling Cheeto that in his last fight with Corey Sandhagen, you're starting to bum me out, has just lived rent-free in my head when thinking about this fight, because it bummed me out too, man. Like, that just wasn't Cheeto, but that's what makes me so nervous, because you just don't know sometimes what you're going to get. And I think Pedro's going to start chopping at those legs early, as he always does. As Brandon mentioned, neither has ever been finished in their career. So either way, I do think we're probably going to be a decision here if I had to predict that. Stick around for my parlay. That might play into it later. You never know. But I just worry if Cheeto gets down a round or two right and he needs a finish, much like in that Dominic Cruz fight in a sense. I don't know that he'll be able to do that or find a finish against a guy like Munoz. So I like Munoz by decision.
Well, Pedro likes to get in the fire too, though. He likes to sit there and bang it out with people. And Cheeto's someone who's not suggested to do that with, I would say.
But Cheeto has to go. That's
that's what I'm saying. It's definitely going to depend on how he approaches it. But
if that's what I'm saying is, like, I feel like if it takes him, he does so well. Like, I look, and to be fair, he just hasn't had many like main event fights, right? But most of his decision losses are in 3-round fights. I think he lost 1 5-round fight by decision, if I remember. I can't remember because I did look that up, but he just hasn't had many 5-round fights to really make that a credible thing. But I do think there is something. We know he's a slower starter, and I don't know, man.
Sandhagen,
there you go. So it's just I don't know, man. Historically, and he just can't. But it's like the thing everybody knows, and he knows it. Clearly, he's talked about it, but he just can't break that cycle. And like I said, you go back to that Cruz fight. If he doesn't find a finish there, he might lose that fight by decision. And I just don't know if he can. If he gets in that position against a guy like Munoz, never been finished, so tough. Man, Munoz too. I was going back, and you just forget when he was in the RFA, man. Just choking everybody unconscious.
Oh, yeah. I was talking with JD at the gym about it, like the way he can just like wrap his arm around your head and get to force you into a guillotine up against the cage is crazy, but it'll be
Plus, I can't hear. So our jiu-jitsu instructor, Pedro, gave our jiu-jitsu instructor his blue and purple belt, and I never picked Pedro, and I'm so tired of hearing about it. And the Gutierrez one, I didn't get. I still don't know if I'm living that one down. So whenever Pedro wins, I get a.
I think you jumped in the chat. You guys are stupid.
No, we get called cowards usually. But I'm not picking with my heart here, even though he did that. I just think I like the matchup for Pedro a little bit more. With that, another matchup, boys. I'm excited for this between 2 top 15 welterweights. Number 11, Neil Magny versus number 3, Ian Machado Gary. And as I sometimes say, things in MMA always seem to work themselves out the way they were supposed to be, right? And to me, that's exactly what happened here in this fight. Gary was set to face Jeff Neal on this card. However, last week it was announced that Neal had to withdraw due to injury. So willing to step up, as he always is, and take this fight was the always game Neil Magny. Magny's coming into this fight 2-2 in his last 4. His most recent fight was a split decision victory over Phil Rowe back in June. And I think one of the biggest weapons and advantages that Magny is bringing into this fight is his experience, right? 38 professional fights to Gary's 12. Really big discrepancy there. But what we've seen from Ian Machado Gary is why he is such a favorite in this matchup, I think. As Gary is coming in a perfect 12-0 in his MMA career, perfect 5-0 in the UFC, coming in off that head kick TKO victory over Daniel Rodriguez in May. And after that fight, he actually called Neil Magny out in the ring, believe it or not. Magny responded. I think a week later he fought. It seemed like that was the fight we were going to get, right? But instead they booked IMG versus Jeff Neal. And I'd be interested to hear everyone's thoughts. Chat, you guys as well. But I thought Jeff Neal may have been a step too far, too soon for Ian Gary. I just think about how good we all believe Shavkat Rakhmonov to be, right? And Jeff Neal gave him all he could handle, man. Like, great fight. So the reason I say everything kind of works itself out sometimes is because I feel this is just a better fight, matchup, everything for Ian Gary, and a more natural progression for him. I just feel like Neal was just a big jump, man, for me.
Right. Well, we'll find out, right? Because
we are going to find
people
out,
don't,
sure.
you know, especially if he goes out and head kick knocks out Neil Magny, people don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, he's been subbed, but people aren't just putting him away with strikes like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So if he does that quickly, it's like, oh, well, maybe it was Jeff Neal, but this is a good chance before, you know, because, I mean, when you go undefeated and you have all these finishes, you've built yourself up as this next Irish, you know, superstar. We kind of look to see him get as big as possible, as quick as possible, because that's kind of how he's billing himself. But this definitely does give him a chance to possibly show us without having to face, you know, one of the better guys in the division.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not so sure that I think Magny is that far off from like even a Jeff Neal. Like he fought Gilbert Buns. Wow, he fought Gilbert Burns. He fought Gilbert Burns not too long ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there was a moment. Now, granted, that fight went how it went, but there was a moment where Magny was in the conversation because he was on a streak of his own. I mean, he finished Rodriguez himself. Granted, it was a little bit longer, tougher fight for him than what Ian Gary had, but you know
he has a win over Jeff Neal.
Yeah. So again, I see what you're saying, but I just think, I don't know. I think that just styles make fights, and I think that's part of the reason Jeff performed so well against Shavkat.
Styles do make fights, and one thing that, you know, you just said how he has a win over Jeff Neal, and that's kind of the only thing I was going to say is Jeff Neal's one of those guys you don't always know what you're going to get, right? The Jeff Neal, though, that I think we saw against Shavkat Rakhmonov, clearly a motivated, focused guy. I don't know. That would have been a really big fight. That would have been a tough fight for Ian Gary, I think.
Sure, but I think this is going to be a tough fight for Ian Gary, too.
Well, and then you have Ian Gary doing the T-shirt thing. Like, he started really, ramping it up, man.
That was getting zesty.
Yeah, he's... And I mean, that's kind of what he's been doing. Like, even like in the embeddeds and in some of these pre-fight conferences and stuff.
Yeah, he went at Neil Magny, man. I feel like Neil Magny, I feel like we don't see him get drawn into that a little bit.
Well, and he also just jumped, like, straight into the Conor bag.
That's true. That's true, too.
which is part of his thing, right?
And he doesn't hide it.
No.
Yeah, he's very honest.
And I mean, at least it makes sense. Like, that's the guy from where you're from who did what you're trying to do.
Did anybody say what they thought about?
Yeah, we got Marcus Mustard saying, hell yeah, we'll find out. Gary inside the distance. And he said, TKO 20-punch combo. Let's go.
Hey, that might be it. Who you like?
Yeah, so the only thing I dislike about this for Magny is that it was kind of short notice. So if this was like full camp Magny, I think I would have leaned him here. But I like Ian in this one. I don't think Magny's going to have a chance to really get going. So I like Ian Gary here. I don't know if he's going to be able to finish Magny. Magny's last KO loss was Ponzinibbio, and that was in like the 4th round. So I'm going to take Ian Gary by decision here. Or are we just doing 1 point?
Oh, you can do whatever. It's just 1 point. Okay. But you can say.
I don't think that Gary gets the finish here because Magny's just that tough. But I think Gary wins it. I think he outstrikes him for sure.
Yeah, I like Ian Gary in this as well. And I think he's going to overwhelm him. I think he has all the momentum right now. He has all the confidence, obviously, because he's just saying whatever he wants to. I mean, he said he's the reason people are going to be tuning into this card. Like, he's bought all the way into himself, and when we've seen that, people usually show up really well. So I think he's going to overwhelm early and possibly get a finish, because those head kicks, it don't matter how tough you are. You get kicked in the head, it's rough.
Yeah, I think it's Ian Gary. I think most people are obviously leading the odds, even support that. And I'm like Brandon, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but he just continues to look more impressive every time we see him fight. And I think, too, one thing is he's one of the few guys who can physically match Neil Magny in terms of size, right? And I bring that up because I think Gary will get the better of the striking exchanges. He's just so technical, but even more importantly, he carries a ton of power, man. He doesn't just hit guys, he moves them, and his shots just seem to do so much damage. You go back to that Song fight, right? He basically busted that dude up with just a jab, essentially.
Right.
Just did so much damage, and his jab is fast. So I think for Magny, you know, he might look to get this fight against the cage, try to get Gary down, or maybe look to get on his neck. But again, Gary physically will be such a tougher test for Magny to get down because of his size and strength. The 80-inch reach for Magny could give Gary some issues. You know, defensively, you know, Ian's obviously, we've seen him tagged a couple times. It's gotten better, you know, since his first couple of fights. But Magny hasn't won by TKO since 2018. Is that what You said that, didn't you?
No, I just said his last loss was Ponce.
Yeah, he hasn't won by TKO since then, so I don't know that the stand-up will be much of a threat for a guy like Ian Gary. And I don't think Magny can control Gary to a decision either. That's why I'm kind of going Gary. I'm just having hard ways in my head to find Neil Magny winning this fight. Magny is tough to finish. Lately, he's been getting finished with chokes. I think his last 3 were by choke. But I think if Gary finds himself on top of Magny, he's going to ground and pound. I don't.
Well, did you see where he went to train for this? Right?
Who?
Ian Gary.
City Kickboxing, right?
No, he went to Brazil with Charles Oliveira the last
right,
part of his camp.
Yeah.
So he might have some sneak. He might have the.
I thought he was going to City Kickboxing.
I think he has cross-trained there, but the end of this camp, he was in Brazil with Charles Oliveira.
See, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, because
that's interesting.
He talked about it on Twitter, but that's why some people are taking him on like a betting side for sub, just in case maybe he learned something down there. And
stick around for my parlay. It might play into it. You never know.
Right.
But I do like him to finish, probably within round 2 as well. Like I said, tough fight, but yeah, it's just. I don't know. I still think there's something to that Jeff Neal, though. I still want to see that. I hope, regardless of what happens, I still hope we see that. I still think even if he beats Neil Magny, Jeff Neal still makes sense. So I guess if there's anything, there's that as well.
Right.
And here we are, boys. We find ourselves in our co-main event for the women's strawweight title. Champion Zhang Weili versus number 5 Amanda Lemos. The now 2-time strawweight champ Weili comes into this bout on a 2-fight win streak with back-to-back second-round finishes over Joanna Jędrzejczyk in January of last year, and most recently off her title win over Carla Esparza in November of last year. Her opponent, Amanda Lemos, I feel has somewhat quietly earned this title shot, or earned her way into this title shot. Lemos is coming into this fight on a 2-fight win streak with back-to-back finishes over Michelle Waterson Gomez and most recently Marina Rodriguez in November of last year. So both of these ladies fighting for the first time this year, and both coming in off about a 9-month layoff. And I almost feel that 9 months has kind of hurt this matchup in a way, because I feel with the recent success of Yan Xiaonan and Tatiana Suarez that a lot of fans feel one of them, especially Yan Xiaonan, given the timetable, should be facing Weili in this fight. But when you go back to November, when both of these ladies won their fights, coming off of that, Yan was 1-2 at that time, and Tatiana Suarez still hadn't made her return after 4 years. So this matchup made a ton of sense with both ladies coming off their wins at that time. But for whatever reason, they waited. And I don't know, maybe I kind of wonder if they were trying to see if they could set up Weili and Yan in China. And for whatever reason, it just didn't materialize. So they're doing this until they can figure that out. I don't know. And none of this is to say Lemos isn't still deserving of the title shot. I'm not saying that, because I do find this to be a very intriguing matchup against two ladies who almost all of their wins come by finish. I just think as a matchup, it's getting a little overlooked. And there's almost like a bit of a, at least I'm getting the impression, like okay, let's hurry up and get this over with vibe, because everybody's ready for Xiaonan and Suarez and what's hot right now, right? And it's a bit unfortunate, I think.
You think people are looking past Lemos specifically, or just the fight
think a lot
itself?
of people are looking past Lemos for sure, but and I don't know, because I just think Tatiana's really set this division on fire, and Yan did before that, to be fair. I'd be interested to know why they waited so long. To do this, because it did make so much sense. They could have done it first quarter of this year, maybe.
Well, and it makes you wonder if there's other fights that they were seeing, if they go a certain way, what you could set up. I don't know.
I really feel like they were trying to do the China thing.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the most sense.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could kind of, and it makes sense to hold out for that fight as well. If they know it can happen at a later time, there is that as well. Right,
and I think part of maybe some of the overlook too is with Lemos, you've seen her against one former champion, Andrade, and it didn't go her way.
Yeah.
Whereas with Weili, she's only fought some of the best females ever to fight in that division, her past 5 or 6 fights. So
who are you taking, Brandon?
I'm taking Weili here. I think she's gonna wrestle too. I think she'll look good in the striking, but I think that she's gonna lean on that grappling, because I just think especially with the title fight recently, she just showed some new shades. She's constantly showing new wrinkles in that for every time she fights. So I think she's gonna lean on that heavy. I'm gonna take her by, we'll go with 3rd round submission for Weili.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah, I feel that Weili has always, especially her past 2 fights, just shown very, very much improvement, and even out wrestling Carla Esparza and getting her down and just really controlling her in the grappling. It was a big thing for her. And I think with Lemos, it is a mixed bag of, is she going to land a big punch early, or is somebody going to be able to control her? Which she has one knockout loss to Leslie Smith a long time ago, and then obviously the sub, but the sub shows that there is a little bit of a kink there. So I'm actually going to lean Weili. I think she will use the wrestling. I think her striking is very, very crisp, even with the Joanna fight before that, before the Esparza fight. So I'm going to take Weili. I will say 4th round TKO.
Oh, boys, I am ready to let the dogs out here, all right? I'm not super confident in picking either of these ladies here in this fight. I can definitely see a world where Lemos puts some pressure and pace on Weili and disrupts some of the footwork and technique that she brings. And if Lemos can make it a bit of a brawl, I could see her catching Weili. And then for Weili, no one other than Rose has kind of cracked the code on how to beat her in the UFC. She continues to look better every time we see her, too. As John mentioned, even in that fight with Carla, the grappling and counter wrestling were just next level, and that's something we know that she's been working on. So to do it against a wrestler like Carla was super impressive. But I'm picking this more off of a feeling and a hunch than anything. But I am going Amanda Lemos here. I worry about her being a little too one-dimensional in this fight, but I'm interested to see how Weili handles her strength and physicality, especially if we do see some grappling and some scrambles and wrestling exchanges. I think her power is next level in this division, and when she smells blood, there's just no stopping her. Like, she's going to go for the finish. If she rocks Weili at any point, she's going to go for it, and I think she has to. She will need a finish, in my opinion. So I'm going to take 2nd round TKO finish for Lemos. But again, I don't feel super confident about it. What worries me, too, is how wide her stance is at times. And because she relies on that power, she tends to keep so much weight on that lead foot, right? So if Weili starts eating up those legs early,
or just winging a punch,
yeah,
duck under, boom, now you're on your back. Just as you were saying yours, Marcus Mustard comes through. Love the co-main and main event. I pick Lemos, but just by a sprinkle.
Marcus. A sprinkle. That's how I am.
Yeah.
It's just more like a hunch, a feeling. But I don't know. I just have this feeling that she's just going to come out and just look to get all over Weili, man.
I just don't know what striking-wise Lemos can bring this that is going to be better than Joanna or Rose or some of the people she's faced. Like, what is she going to see that she hasn't seen from them?
Yeah.
So that because if she can't land those big things, does she have enough game to get to the jiu-jitsu?
That's what I said. I'm just a little concerned about her being maybe a little too one-dimensional, but I feel like maybe there's some underrated aspects to her ground game. We just haven't maybe seen it entirely. Right. But, dude, I'm telling you, if she comes out and cracks her, I don't know. What scares me, too, is that she's going to come out and just get frozen by Weili, because we do see that happen a lot, right? Like, that was the thing with Valentina for so long, is or even Amanda, which Juliana Pena finally broke that, is she just went for it, right? She didn't freeze and get scared of it or whatever. She just went for the finish. So I hope Amanda goes for it, but man, I just have this hunch. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. I feel it in my neck a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Marcus Mustard asking, do you guys do another podcast on Monday doing a recap? We do. It's the Neon Belly podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those places. We also have a YouTube where we put clips, but we will be covering all these on Monday.
Absolutely. At Neon Belly Podcast. That's knee as in Knee. I get a lot of people that say neon.
Yeah.
So
you had the little logo in the bottom of the video, right?
Yeah,
so
well, it's not there now, but
the
it'll be down here in just a sec when we're done with our picks, the podcast. So appreciate anybody that would love to listen to that. And here we are, boys. The main event. I am so excited to hear everybody's thoughts on this. The champ, Aljamain Sterling versus number 2 Sugar, Sean O'Malley. And let us begin with the champion, Aljamain Sterling, who is unbeaten in his last 9 mixed martial arts bouts. This will be his 4th title defense since winning the title from Petr Yan by DQ back in March of 2021. And he's coming off that split decision win over Henry Cejudo back in May of this year. And in the blue corner, you got the Sugar Show, Sean O'Malley. O'Malley comes in unbeaten in his last 5 bouts. He does have the 1 no contest mixed in with Munoz in there and last year. O'Malley is coming off his biggest win by far, a split decision victory over Petr Yan at UFC 280 in October of last year. I know it was close. Some fans had Yan winning, but it's still a defining victory for O'Malley, right? And really solidified himself here as a true title contender, I think. Regardless of how you think, he still got the win. It was a close fight.
Do you think he won?
I wouldn't rewatch it. Yeah. I think he won. It was close, man. I honestly, like, I'm not just like, I really think it was a close fight. It really was. If Jan would have won it, even rewatching it, but I'll be honest, man, I really thought I went and rewatched Cejudo Aljo, and I thought Cejudo, that fight was a lot closer than I thought. Aljo really kind of dominated. Not dominated, that's a bad word, but I was pretty content with Aljo winning that fight, man. That was a close fight when you rewatch it. Really close fight. Yeah, O'Malley, though, is going against an Aljamain Sterling, who I believe to be one of the best bantamweights of all time. And I think we can really start there, right? Because I do believe that distinction of GOAT status is on the line here for Aljo with a win over O'Malley. Yet I bet if you polled a large majority of the fan base, right, they would not agree with that. Right. Given the circumstances around most of his recent fights, we've talked about it on our Instagram. You look at our Aljo, any clips that we post from podcasts, and we're talking about Aljo, people feel very strongly about Aljo and his title reign. But what I still find baffling about the whole argument is show me one of those instances or circumstances in Aljo's career that was his fault, right? He can't help he was illegally kneed. He can't help that, TJ Dillashaw shows up with a bum shoulder. Right. He can't help that the fight you thought he lost against Cejudo, 2 of the 3 judges thought he won.
Don't leave it to the judges.
Right, and this is also a guy who, by the way, said yes to Petr Yan twice. So you remember that legal knee.
Right.
He was willing to come back and prove that he was the champion.
And he did not look good in that fight.
He dominated, man. He kind of really dominated Petr Yan. He said yes to TJ Dillashaw. He said yes to Henry Cejudo. Here he is 3 months later saying yes to Sean O'Malley, a turnaround that he didn't seem really thrilled about, if we're being honest. And I honestly don't think most champs would in this situation, right? We don't see this very often from champions. And he even felt a little forced into this, right? But not to mention, he has the most wins in the division history, longest win streak, most title defenses.
That's what Marcus just said in the chat. He said it's crazy that he has the most title defenses in bantamweight when you think about all the champions, but it did just, there's been so many guys have their little run, it just never lasted.
Well, and not only just wins over all the guys I just mentioned in Dillashaw, Cejudo, Yan, but wins over Corey Sandhagen, Pedro Munoz, Jimmy Rivera, Renan Barão.
How about a first round sub win over Corey Sandhagen?
Right, made him look like nothing, man. And I don't see how if you add a talent like Sean O'Malley to that list in a title defense in this spot, how are we not talking about the greatest bantamweight in UFC history? I mean, I just don't get it. But I mean, and maybe a lot of people in the chat, don't, they agree with that, right? But I'm saying, like, we get trashed on our Instagram.
People love Dominique Cruz, and I get, some, even TJ, like, you can get some of these.
But the numbers don't even support it anymore,
exactly.
right?
It's just popularity at that point.
But even if, yes, but I mean, like I said, the numbers don't support it. But then on the other side, O'Malley is very similar to, in that he's a polarizing fighter who many fans are either super hot or super cold on, and he has to deal with his fair share of haters and doubters as well. I can probably throw my hand up as well. I was wrong on O'Malley a bit. I give him a lot of credit getting himself here, right? He came in with a ton of hype, and every fight he's under a microscope. And that's even like going into tomorrow. Like, I don't think the pressure of this moment is going to get to him too much. Right. Every time he's in there, he's been under a lot of pressure. He's handled that well, continues to rise to the occasion and back it up. But he's another guy, man. He's had a lot of weird circumstances around his fights as well, right? He's also had to fight back from injury early in his UFC career. And I think he's more than deserving of this opportunity, especially coming off the Petr Yan fight, where me and many outside of his fan base didn't give him much of a chance going into that fight, if I'm being honest. Especially, he was essentially coming off the Julian Paiva fight, because the way that the Pedro Munoz fight materialized, right? So to be coming off like Paiva, half a fight against Munoz, and then Petr Yan, like, that's crazy, man. I felt like Yan was a little bit step too big, but again, he pulled it off, man. So I think this is a great matchup. I really do.
One thing I'll say about the Yan fight, because I give that a lot of flack, was one thing O'Malley did show was he's not a pushover. He was very tough throughout that fight. Got dropped, was able to hang through some grappling against Petr Yan. So credit's due there. So I'll give him that. But as far as this fight, man, I had such a hard time picking for this because I could see it if Aljo is on and he shoots and he gets a hold of O'Malley, I don't see any reason why he can't get behind him and sink in a rear naked choke and finish him in 1 or maybe 2 rounds. I see no reason. But O'Malley's got that right hand that he just launches, and if he can land that on Aljo, again, I see no reason why he can't put Aljo to sleep in 1 round or 2 rounds. So this is very much to me who's going to institute their game and who's going to do it better. So I also have questions with this because if Aljo, like the quick turnaround, you talked about that, how invested is Aljo in winning this fight? Like I kind of wonder that. How much is he just looking ahead at
kind of talking about moving up already?
Yeah, like I don't have to worry about, weight cuts as much. I'm going up to you got Merab coming up. Like I don't know. I kind of question where his head's at. Even having his hand forced in this a little bit, according to him. So that makes me nervous. But as far as the all-around fighter, I like Aljo here because of the grappling. He's got some weird striking. He's got the kicks up the middle. He used a lot against Cejudo that were very, very successful. So I'm ever so slightly leaning Aljo here. I like him by finish because I think, again, if he gets a hold and on top of O'Malley, I don't think O'Malley's going to be able to hang with him. So I like Aljo by, I'll say 4th round submission.
Alrighty.
Nice. What's tough about this for me, and it's just kind of like one of those we'll see how it turns out, is O'Malley has had this kind of I'm staying away from wrestlers route all the way up until, and then Jan had some grappling, but he's not a wrestler like Aljamain Sterling is. So I think we'll tell really early if he dodged a lot of bullets to get up here by missing wrestlers, or if so-and-so would have took him down, his jiu-jitsu is good enough to get back up and start using that. And even on like you guys said with Aljo, it's interesting to see if a foot out does kind of keep this out, or knowing, my teammate's going to get in, like how much of his head is in it. The one thing I worry about with Aljamain is because he loves to spam those takedowns, he's opening up to these knees that he gets hit with a lot. Just hasn't been. Marlon Moraes hit him with the one that knocked him out, but Cejudo was able to land that. Corey Sandhagen threw one, it didn't land, but he just kind of puts his head down by there a lot. And Sean O'Malley is a very well accomplished striker who can easily set that up himself. So that does worry me a little bit. And in the embeddeds, it seemed like he brought a lot of lanky guys to fight him, but he's like, yeah, these guys aren't as fast as him, but if I can get in on them, I can get in on him. But the problem is speed kills, man. Like if you can't see that punch coming, it's not going to matter if you can get to his hips. So that does worry me a little bit. But what, to me, the one factor that's above all is he has such a good game of getting scrambles and getting the back. He doesn't have a high takedown average, but as far as landing them, but he creates these scrambles. He gets you to turn away from him so he can get on your back. And when he does, even if he doesn't finish you, you don't get him off. So he could get to a couple rounds of holding on the back, tiring Sean O'Malley, and then eventually getting a finish, which is what I think he's going to do. So I'm going to go Aljamain Sterling by 2nd round sub.
It may be a little cliche to say, but see, I think this could come down to who can implement the other's game better. Can Aljo use his striking effectively enough to set up his takedowns? Can O'Malley defend the takedowns enough, or use some counter wrestling even to stifle Aljo's grappling? And the biggest thing for me is we just haven't seen anyone do that in a while against Aljamain Sterling. He's just so relentless with the takedowns, and physically you can tell his strength is on another level, especially in that clinch. But the biggest level difference Aljo brings is when the fight does hit the mat, right? We all just talked about it. He's on another planet. And if you look at the Jan O'Malley fight, Piotr did have some success in getting O'Malley down, but when the fight got there, Piotr wasn't always covering the hips and the legs of O'Malley. And for a guy like O'Malley, who is no slouch on the ground, you can build a base back up, frame on the hips, Granby roll he used in that matchup as well, whatever. But what makes Aljo so good on the ground is he doesn't leave space, man. He's constantly pressuring, constantly smothering, and that is just so tough to deal with. We have a lightweight at our gym, and he can feel heavier than a 300-pound man on you because he's just positionally so good. Right. You know what I'm saying? And you have to work every inch to get, when somebody's that good, it's just exhausting, and you have to work for every little inch. And even on the feet, I think Aljo's striking looked much improved in that Cejudo fight. And sometimes these striker-grappler matchups, you do see the grappler have some success in the stand-up, actually, kind of like Khabib Conor, for example. Right. When one guy's kind of so worried about that takedown, it does leave some openings for some strikes. So I wouldn't count Aljo out completely on the feet here. Now, I don't think it would be wise for him to have, prolonged exchanges or times where this fight's on the feet. O'Malley has such good movement, excellent feints. As Brandon mentioned, the right hand is the moneymaker for him. When he's orthodox, it's a laser beam. When he's southpaw, he's jabbing guys' heads off and looping it over their guard. But another reason I'm leaning Aljo is just the overall experience and competition level. Jan was a great win for O'Malley, but given how close it was, I just would have loved to have seen him get one more fight against like a top 10, top 5 guy, you know, in like a 5-round fight night main event, even if it was just like a Rob Font, Dominic Cruz, just another super solid vet. And Aljo has just been fighting the best in this division for a very long time. Plus, I just think he's in his prime. I think he's the greatest, you know, bantamweight of all time. Give me Aljo 3rd round sub. I think O'Malley does a good job defending early. And again, though, I think the pace and just that pressure that Aljo can put on him, I think it'll be too much in the end. Also, I don't know if you guys saw, but Aljo's already up to 144 pounds. Did you see that? He said 144 and climbing. This dude might be a lightweight by the time tomorrow night hits.
In the chat, Marcus Mustard saying that he's taking O'Malley. Can't wait for tomorrow. And MMA Jesus 420. O'Malley round 1 flying knee.
Wow. All right. I think if O'Malley does it, it's early.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely can see that, you know.
Because I think the power phase, I think you saw that a little bit with the Jan fight too.
Yeah.
Like after the 2nd, 3rd round, especially, the right hand just wasn't quite as stingy.
Yeah.
And I think the things that helped Cejudo be able to, because obviously, you know, we know he can take down an Olympic level wrestler, so there's not like a takedown defense is going to be enough to keep him away. But I don't think what the advantages that Cejudo has, being kind of smaller, being able to build quicker, you know, with his smaller limbs, helps him out a little bit. Whereas if O'Malley's posting, trying to get up, he's going to get that arm snatch, and, you know, like you said, Aljamain's just not going to give him a second to breathe.
You know what I find interesting? I was in watching that Henry Cejudo fight is that front headlock position that, you know, Aljo finds himself in a lot. And, you know, it cost him the Piotr Jan fight. You know, when he got there with Cejudo, you almost heard the crowd kind of like scoff a little bit, like, come on, dude. Maybe it's just my jiu-jitsu brain, but I was thinking today, I really don't mind it because I don't think he's doing it to try to get kneed, right? Like, I think he wants somebody to come in because if he can engage that, like, Aljo wants to fight on the ground, right? That's where he wants to be. He wants to get on the back, right? If he can get somebody to engage that front headlock position, he can look for arm drags, peek outs, I mean, slide by. I mean, there's so many different things to try to get to the back from that position. So I think there's a little bit of that, too, where it's like, go ahead.
I'm just going to throw this out there. I was watching the old quintet that O'Malley competed in. He had a guillotine submission win over Takanori Gomi.
He's no slouch, man. He's no slouch.
I'm just going to throw it up there when you're throwing out front headlock stuff.
I saw Aljo tweeted today that O'Malley's jiu-jitsu coach, they
Tim
fought.
Welch?
No. His O'Malley's actual jiu-jitsu coach. He's like an 80cc champion. Aljo fought him. I can't remember who won that fight, though. He tweeted it. He just tweeted it today.
Well, you figure if he tweeted it, he probably won, right?
I don't know.
I mean, Aljo's only lost 3 times.
I think he did win.
And it's 2 split decisions, and then the Marlon Moraes. And the split decisions were...
It was a very grappling-heavy match.
Yeah.
So...
MMA Jesus said O'Malley's at 152 right now.
Yeah, I saw he took a picture with like a happy dad.
Oh yeah, holding it up.
Like he was like 157. So yeah, he probably is like 152. Maybe 144 is not that big of a jump.
MMA Jesus said Aljo did beat his jiu-jitsu coach.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So yeah, perfect. I thought so. It was just a grappling heavy matchup, but I think O'Malley. Somebody can confirm this. I think he's like a brown or a black belt under this guy too.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. That's what I'm saying. Like, O'Malley's not a slouch on the ground either. But that's why I think, you know, it's just who can implement that game better.
Marcus must have just say thanks for the content. No problem, man. Appreciate you showing up. We've seen you another one, so definitely come back.
Absolutely.
He said 2 gallons of water is 16 pounds. That's easy.
Yeah. I love it. Let's get to our parlays real quick, John. As always, be smart. Use caution when you know you're placing bets. It's just for fun. If you guys have any parlays that you're playing tomorrow night, drop those down in the chat. We'd love to see what your bets, what your parlay. Where's everybody thinking, right? Where are you putting your money? We'd love to see that. John, we will start with your parlay. Go ahead.
All right. My parlay, I'm calling it the Saturday lunch special. And it's because you're going to get a sub, some Cheetos, and it ain't going to last.
Okay.
So I'm taking Aljamain by sub, Chito Marlon Vera on the money line, and RoboCop Gregory Rodriguez to not go the distance against Dennis Tullian. I'm not exactly sure how to say his last name, but RoboCop doesn't go to decision. That's just the type of guy he is. So
I love it. My parlay, I'm calling my parlay the Boston Teep Party. What do you think about that, Brandon? I'm going, dude, come on. What do you do?
Right.
I want that on a shirt, the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah,
right?
just a picture of somebody throwing one.
I'm going Carini Silva to win, Munoz Vera to go to a decision, and Ian Gary to win by KO, TKO, or submission. And all that can be had at plus 269 on the odds. So
yeah, mine was plus 410. I do have some tinfoily ones that are just never going to hit, but I put $1 on them anyways.
John sent me one that was like plus 9,000, and I'm like, John, you cannot do this.
I'm just saying. So we don't give those to you guys, but
I love it.
Marcus Mustard said Silva parlay, double Brazilian favorite to open the night.
That's a good one.
Carini and then Natalia over.
That's a really good one. I like
Sprinkle.
The Silvas.
Yeah.
I like it.
Both of them are really good, man.
I know. Brandon, I know that you don't do these, but if you had to bet every dime in your bank account right now on one of these fights at UFC 292, one of these fights, who would it be? One winner.
Just a winner?
One winner from the whole card, top to bottom.
Just winner, that's it. Not like decision or anything?
Like if all your money was on
just
the
on
line.
the money line.
Yeah.
Oh, man, give me like 30 seconds to think for this.
Top to bottom, think about it. Would be maybe RoboCop down there. You think he's going to pull
He's one of the bigger favorites.
Probably Gary.
Ian Gary?
Probably Gary over
He'd be
Neil.
your lock. Come on.
You'd be willing to tell your kid, sorry, no Christmas.
Aljo's close, but I can't get away from that knee, man. I just feel like O'Malley can land something like that on him.
Fair enough.
So I would go with Gary. Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I just had to ask.
Put the pressure on him.
Yeah,
the whole thing.
Poor Brandon. He's tired, man.
Yeah.
Again, man, just want to thank everybody for jumping in tonight. Please check out our weekly MMA podcast, the Neon Belly Podcast. It's right down here. All the information for that. Give us a follow on all the socials at Neon Belly Podcast. Also, make sure you are subscribed right here on the MMA Underground YouTube, and make sure you follow on all social media as well at the UG. Make sure you're going to mixedmartialarts.com to stay up to date with all things happening in MMA. And again, the World MMA Awards, make sure you're going and voting the Anna Flooring Pod for Best MMA Program, and the one and only John Morgan for Journalist of the Year. John, is there anything else in chat before we get out of here?
Nope. It seems like people just, Marcus gave us his little parlay, and that's pretty much where we're at.
Anything before we go? One more, John. One for the people.
Boston, let's see it. There's been a lot of good crowds the past couple of weeks, so let's see if you can keep it up.
Brandon, what you got? What's your one for the people?
Oh, I'm just waiting on that friend request from Aljo on chess.com. So
That is true. That is true. Brandon wants
He's probably a little busy with the fight, so I'll give him until after the fight.
So Brandon is like our chess master over here. I think he's like top 3 in Indiana, where we're from.
Yeah.
And he is, we showed him, Aljo again tweeted out his chess. What is it? Chess.com?
Just his username.
Yeah.
Which is Twitter. Yeah.
And Brandon's coming for all the smoke. I can't wait. Wait.
Your boy Dorman came in last minute.
Yeah.
Vera, Rodriguez, Silva by KO, and Weili plus 999.
Ooh. Okay, wait. Say it again.
Vera, Rodriguez, Silva by KO, and Weili.
I like it.
Yeah.
The odds are crazy, man.
Yeah, it was hard to keep it realistic.
That's why I kind of went more props and stuff.
Right.
It's like, dude, some crazy odds for this card.
Marcus Mustard say PFL co-main right now, so.
I know. I was going to turn it on, but I was afraid to double pull the internet and lose the stream. But yes, going to go watch that. We got Maurice Green and Fajeda, I think. Who's the co-main? Somebody quick. Marcus, who is it? Who's in the co-main? I love Is it Pacheco, Larissa?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So let's go watch that, boys. We'll be back in exactly 3 weeks on Friday, September 8th to preview UFC 293. That's Israel Adesanya versus Sean Strickland, Tai Tuivasa versus Alexander Volkov, and Kai Kara France versus Manel Kopp. So come back on the 8th. We'll see you guys then. Until then, peace.
Unless you miss us, and you can see us on Monday on Neon Belly Podcast.
There you go. I love it, John. See you guys. Peace. Enjoy the fights.